Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Audio Judo. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Matthew. This is your podcast, Music Discovery, Audio Judo. Did I say that? Did you say that?
You said it.
I'm saying it right now. So we're
You are
proud
saying
members of the
it right.
Pantheon Podcast Network, your premier source of music podcasts, now numbering well over 100 podcasts.
Wow.
We also produce two additional podcasts, Audio Judo Does Jazz and Throughline, both of which can be found on Pantheon or our website, audiojudo.com, or anywhere else that you get your podcasts from, except I just ended that sentence in a preposition, so that's weird. Just
Off in whose shed they were jacking.
I want to go back to something we talked about a few weeks ago. We did released an episode about 9 Inch Nails recently.
Yeah.
And I got a response from our UK consultant, Simon.
Oh.
He wrote me a little letter that I'm going to read.
Lovely.
He said, "Hey guys, well that was unexpected. I never thought I'd hear the words Jive Bunny mentioned on Audio Judo. I thought I had erased this aberration from my memory, but when Kyle mentioned them, it all came flooding back. Jive Bunny actually had 3 #1 singles in the UK in 1989, which may seem unbelievable, but the UK already had a history of novelty records reaching the top of the charts dating back to the early 70s, and this continued well into the 21st century. In the early 80s, a Dutch studio band called Stars on 45 released several singles which were effective melodies of earlier hits from the 60s and 70s, which were very successful in the UK and led to a number of similar releases. For example, Damned on 45 by Captain Sensible. Then, when sampling became a thing in the late 80s, producers and DJs were able to create mashups of lots of different songs to create something which sounded quite unique. Unfortunately, this led to a series of bad 90s remixes of classic songs and some pretty awful cover versions sung over a techno backing track, many of which became UK hits. From 1989 to around 1994, you just couldn't get away from this stuff as it was always on the radio and on TV, so you can imagine the early 90s were a rather grim time for UK music. And then he finished, "Anyway, thanks for the 9 Inch Nails episode, a band I have always been aware of, but I have never owned or listened to any of their albums. All the best, Simon." See?
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Simon.
You guys send us stuff, we'll read it on air. But yeah, we appreciate the feedback. More deep dives on Jive Bunny. Always my favorite.
It is super interesting to see, because you can read that. There's like a blurb on Wikipedia that basically says that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to hear from somebody who's actually living in the UK and presumably lived in the UK at the time. I don't know how old Simon is, but sounds like he probably lived through this. And, to have that first person perspective and to hear like, hey, it happened, unfortunately.
Right.
It's cool. It's cool to hear.
Grim time for UK music. So grim.
A grim time for the UK music scene.
So thanks for that, Simon.
Yeah.
So for this episode, I thought I would head right back to the 1980s, a decade that we spend an awful lot of time in.
We do.
I've known that I wanted to do an album by this band since the very beginnings of our show, but I always got some pushback from friends when I suggested which album I wanted to do. Almost everyone wanted the record that comes after this one in their discography. But I think this is the superior album. So today we're talking about the 1988 album Nothing Shocking by the legendary alternative band Jane's Addiction. So obviously, people really wanted us to cover the follow-up to this, 1990s Ritual de l'Habitual, if for no other reason than the song Been Caught Stealing. And I get it. That album is awesome, damn near flawless. 3 Days is one of the best alternative songs of all time. And I think if they had left it as intended, we would absolutely be covering that record today. That last record was supposed to be the last Jane's Addiction record. They were
Mm-hmm.
done. They were at their peak. They were more popular than ever and had just released this masterpiece and decided that they were going to go out on top. I kind of admired that. But instead, now 35 years removed, they have continued to dip into that well, and every subsequent
Mm.
album that they've released has got worse and worse, which kind of tarnishes what that album was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I chose this one because I actually love this one more.
This is a really good album, and it's one of those albums that not only do I almost always forget about Jane's Addiction, no offense to them, but they're just one of those bands that slips my mind all the time.
Yeah.
This album also, like, if you played this for anybody that was alive in the 90s, like, and, competent of music, or, cognizant of what music was on the air in the 90s,
Right.
they would absolutely target this album and say, oh, 94, 95, 96, maybe as late as like 98, right?
Yeah.
Came out in 1988.
88.
Right? I mean, this is pre-grunge.
In the heart
This
of
is
hair metal.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
right at that time where it was like hair metal and pop music were all you heard on the radio. And then along comes this. And there's a reason why a lot of people consider this to sort of be the first stepping stone into the grunge era, because it timed out just right. It really is. It was something that was not happening at the time. Nobody was making music like this. Nobody was making, a lot of people call it rock. A lot of people call it alternative. I think it kind of fits somewhere in between those two categories.
It's
But
even,
it's such a sound that was so definitive of the mid '90s. But here it is, 5, 6, 7 years before that when it was released.
right.
So
And
it was
better
either
than the
mixed
90s.
way better. Oh, it sounds so good too.
It sounds good right from the get go, right? And nothing shocking. Go ahead.
I was like, even the original sounded really good. There is a remaster that was 2012 or 2016.
16 or 17 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact year, but the remaster sounds really good. But the original also sounds really, really good. I was very surprised. There's a YouTube video out there that I watched a couple weeks ago that's comparing the two side by side, and it's you can't tell. I mean, you can tell, that they've done some things. They've brought a few instruments up and stuff, but the original still sounds really, really good. Sorry, I didn't mean to divert.
No, absolutely, and it does sound fantastic. And picture, like, I listened to it in its original form all those years ago, and it was eye opening. So nothing shocking was totally shocking indeed. The songs on the record are intense, almost meditatively so in places. They are raw in places. The album cover was controversial. Parents hated the music. It was everything you wanted an album to be when you were 16. It hit all the right notes. And you knew you were onto something when only certain people wanted to listen to this record with you. Music fan or non-music fan? A real music fan, is going to appreciate the uniqueness of the sound, the uncomfortability of his voice, the raw power of the music. A non-music fan isn't going to get it until Jane Says starts playing and they lock back into what you're talking about. And you could use it as a true test of kind of that musical friendship. Do you listen to music at parties, or do you listen to music for sport, or to learn, or to experience? And that's where I was at 16, and that's why I loved it so much, because I have no problem with people that say, I like to listen to music for karaoke, or I listen to Journey's greatest hits, or I go to parties and I listen to this. Fine, that's cool. That's cool. I listen to music differently. And this album just hit a completely different note. And some friends wanted to listen to it. Some friends didn't want to listen to it. And it was a good barometer of kind of where they were in that kind of field. So this album, which is listed as their debut album, technically isn't. It's their major label debut. Their first album, simply titled Jane's Addiction, was a live album that was released independently a year before this, but this is their first true studio album. The album was released in August of '88, eventually went gold, got to number 103 on the Billboard Top 200, but its chart performance would not be indicative of its influence or its critical appeal.
Yeah.
Critics loved it generally. Rolling Stone was a huge fan, calling it simultaneously forbidding and weighty, delicate and ethereal. But our old pal, who we haven't really talked about in a while, Robert Christgau, was also not a fan. He placed it at number 34 for the year on his Village Voice annual list, saying it was Alice Cooper revisited. He still doesn't get it, and he didn't get it then. Rolling Stone would end up putting the record at number 312 on their list of top 500 albums. But before we talk about Nothing Shocking, we should talk about the band that made the record.
Yeah.
Juanes Adicción.
That's the cover band from Tijuana. Juan's Addiction.
Oh, that's
great.
actually how they introduced themselves at the very beginning of Ritual, the next album.
Oh.
That's how they call themselves,
yeah.
Juanes Adicción, so that's why I said that. All right. So when were they formed, Kyle?
1985, actually. They actually came about out of the remains of Perry Farrell's former band, a band called Psycom. Psycom, which is such a good band name. Psycom were formed in 81 as a sort of post-punk band, and they played a lot on the LA underground scene. They were apparently very popular. Perry actually joined the band later in 1983, and he responded to an ad to be a drummer, but showed up and then just convinced them he needed to be the lead singer.
Well, that's Perry for you.
Yeah. They were also looking for a new bass player around the same time, a little after that, and that's how Perry met Eric Avery. The two actually ended up living together in a house for a while with a couple of other roommates, including Jane, who we'll talk about later. The band Psycom actually broke up in 1985 when their self-titled first EP arrived for the pressing plant, and over half the albums showed up warped or otherwise damaged.
That's awful.
It's horrible, and it caused them so much depression and so much like self-doubt that they basically drifted apart and they were no longer a band. They never officially were broken up now, but they just kind of however, Perry and Eric started to begin to put together a new band out of that breakup. We got a guy named Matt Chaikin. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Formerly from the band Community FK. They hired him to be their new drummer, but he failed to show up for their first rehearsal, so they fired him. Eric's younger sister also suggested her boyfriend, Stephen Perkins, who Eric thought might not be a good fit because they had very different musical styles, but he eventually gave in and hired him to be their new drummer. She also suggested a guy named Dave Navarro, who at that point was still pretty fresh. Nobody knew of him. They actually went through 4 guitar players before Dave, and he came along. They had him play some songs and then ended up hiring him.
I have it listed as insert name here on guitars because that's essentially where they were. Eric Avery and Perry they didn't really have similar personalities at all. Perry is one of a kind, but they really bonded over music together. And they bonded over Joy Division, Velvet Underground, specifically those two bands. And if anyone wants to know about those two bands, see episode 65 and 108 respectively on Audio Judo for more information. And they began to jam together, but as they were putting this band together, they were inspired by Perry's muse, his longtime muse, Jane Bainter, who we're probably going to talk about. And as was the case back then, and for a long time after that, they were devotees, shall we say, of heroin.
Yes.
Perry Farrell's girlfriend at the time, Casey Nicolay, someone that we'll talk about later, suggested they call themselves Jane's Heroin Experience. That's the name of the band. To which Perry responded, "I thought it wasn't vague enough. If you want to invite people in, you don't put heroin on your door."
Which is such a good quote.
Which took me a second to think about, what exactly. Oh, he's saying, if you want someone to come in the house, keep the heroin in the house. If you leave it on the door, they're just going to come take your heroin. I mean, it was such an odd quote that I'm like, what is he trying to say here? But so they dropped the heroin and just kind of melded those two, heroin experience to addiction, and voila, Jane's Addiction is born.
Yeah. So they played around LA. They toured a bunch of the clubs locally, and they were really good. They became incredibly popular locally, and they kind of got some interest from several different record labels. Eventually, they signed with Warner Brothers. There was a stipulation in that contract, though, something that you already talked about a little bit, but they would release their first album on the independent label Triple X Records first before they did anything with Warner Brothers. Um, so their manager actually negotiated an advance between $250,000 and $300,000, which was absolutely unheard of for a new band at that time.
Largest advance in the history of Warner Brothers to that date, to that
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
That's massive.
which is nuts.
Yeah.
They then went off and recorded their live album. It's called Jane's Addiction, live at the Roxy Theater, January 1987. They recorded it for a total cost of $4,000.
That's how you get ROI right there.
Right.
$250,000 to $300,000 advance, but the album that we're stipulating we have to make before we record for you will be made for the grand sum of $4,000.
$4,000.
That is how, and Perry, if nothing else, Perry is a genius at marketing, at at negotiating, and that comes up here shortly after with the band itself. Uh, just to give some background on these four gentlemen before we move a little bit forward, Perry was born Peretz Bernstein in Queens, New York in 1959. His mother was an artist. His father was a jeweler. His mom was, when Perry was 3, his mom killed herself, an experience that greatly shaped Perry, kind of adding to his disillusionment as he grew up. And he wrote about that in the song Then She Did, which was on the next album, Ritual. At age 17, he took a surfboard and some dope, moved out to California, like you do. He wanted to be a surfer, but soon found music, entered the LA music scene, and then he ended up with Psycom. And you can't deny this man's presence, right? He's a force. But at this point, he stopped using his birth name and changed his name to Perry Farrell, which is a play on the word peripheral. Perry Farrell.
Which is good.
It is very smart. Eric Avery seemed to have a fairly ordinary upbringing. That's not really the case. We'll deal with that later. But he met Navarro and Perkins in school in Santa Monica, where they attended Notre Dame High School, a local parochial school. He's self-taught musician. Before joining Perry Farrell in the construction of Jane's Addiction, he just kind of bounced around. There's very little written about his background. We get pieces of it here and there, but that's all we kind of know. Dave Navarro also grew up in Santa Monica, picked up the guitar at the age of 7. He was a member of the marching band with Perkins, and other than that, also had no formal musical training other than listening to records and emulating the styles he enjoyed. Homegrown. Stephen Perkins, same thing. 3 pretty ordinary young men and 1 artist/rebel leading the band. It's very interesting to me that a bunch of seemingly normal guys would create such controversy and live so far outside the lines, and that perhaps that is foreshadowed in their upbringing. They were conservative households. That kind of led that ultimate desire to stretch your legs and see how far you can go, especially with a repressive parochial school, of which I have firsthand knowledge, that there is a desire to push past those boundaries and those walls that have kind of been put up around you. So maybe it does make a little bit of sense. But that's just some background. We can pick up where we left off, them headed into the studio.
Yeah. Warner Brothers actually gave them whoa, I'll just smack my mic right out of the way there. Warner Brothers actually gave them a list of producers to choose from, and Perry appreciated producer Dave Jordan's work as an engineer on David Byrne and Brian Eno's album My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, so they ended up choosing him. And Dave Jordan said he actually jumped at the chance to work with them, saying, quote, "I had a demo tape of 18 songs and I listened to it every night all summer. I picked 9 songs from the tape and I put them in an order. And then I said to the band, let's do these 9 songs. You'll rehearse them in this order and we'll record them in this order." And that's what they ended up doing.
But is that not nuts? So they rehearsed and recorded the album in order as it would end up being released.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before. That
we
that you
we
went
talked about
track
somebody.
by
Was it
track.
was it Def Leppard maybe that did that? No,
It's
it couldn't have been
possible.
Def Leppard.
No,
I remember
that was
at
like
least one other
2
band
years of
doing this,
recording.
but yeah, there was some other band that did this as well, and I can't remember what album it was. So somebody can, blast me for that later on. But 150 episodes in, I don't remember all these. But
what?
right?
These aren't like your
I don't.
children. You don't
These are
remember
like
every
my.
little thing.
They're like my children, but I've put all of them up for adoption. So. Oh, look, another one. There you go. Somebody take that.
So they recorded at El Dorado Studios, a Burbank studio that has been there since 1954 and still in use today. Albums recorded there: Black Parade by My Chemical Romance, we've covered that. Hell Awaits by Slayer, and the Uplift Mofo Party Plan by the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Ooh.
So during recording, Farrell pulled one of his patented Farrell moves and told the band that he was demanding 50% of the publishing rights for writing the lyrics and a quarter of the remaining 50% for writing the music, meaning his share would be 62.5% of the total haul. Jordan showed up to the studio one day to find them all leaving, and Farrell's saying that the band had broken up and there's no record. And Warner Brothers held an emergency situation meeting, right? And somehow, some way, Farrell got his demands. Got exactly what he wanted. Like I said, negotiator. But it was the first fracture in this band that would ultimately succumb to all of the fractures over time.
I mean, clearly, how do you negotiate that after you've already started recording? Like, oh, hey, by the way, guys, nice work today, but I'm going to take 62.5% of the profits from this. So just wanted to let everybody know. Have a good night, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.
So was he sitting there and just writing his lyrics, and he's like, damn, these are really good. I need more money for this. This is good. I'm good. Like, what else? Like, what else are you doing? Like, why? Yeah, you're right. Why in the midst of recording? But that's the ultimate power. If he does it before, he's got no power.
That's true. But
if he's in the middle and the band's like, we already got a $300,000 advance.
Yeah.
We kind of need to finish this.
We got to do
nothing.
this. We've spent a ton of that money on heroin already.
Exactly.
We're not paying Warner Brothers back.
So
I guess that's true.
After the money squabble, soon after that, Avery and Farrell had another falling out with Eric Avery accusing Perry of attempting to pick up his girlfriend. Also at that time, Eric Avery had gotten sober, something no one else in the band was doing at that time, further alienating himself from Perry, who thought experimentation and abuse were kind of part of the band's narrative, and it was.
Yeah.
So it's
very sad.
Yeah, it's an interesting period of time here. The album was released in August of '88, like we said, to wonderful reviews. It sold only 250,000 copies in the first year because MTV refused to play some of the videos. Go ahead.
I was just going to say August 23rd, 1988, which was my husband's 3rd birthday.
Oh, my God.
Just putting that in perspective. Shortly after my 4th
what's that
birthday.
You say?
Just putting that in perspective. Just...
Okay, I got a headache.
But yeah, it did struggle really hard there because MTV just would not. They said that a lot of the music videos contained graphic nudity, and gratefully so. The One to Mountain song did actually contain graphic nudity.
There is graphic nudity in that.
Yeah. I mean, fair enough. But MTV just would not play it. So
maybe they had a point. I mean, you can't even play it on 120 minutes at that point.
Yeah.
So, would you like to talk about the album cover? So,
yeah,
the album cover, surrounding controversy, and the story behind it are episodes unto themselves. Go for it.
So, Perry and his girlfriend actually take credit. Casey Nikolai is her name. Are credited as creating the cover album image. It's a picture of a sculpture of a nude female conjoined. Oh god, I can't even read anymore. It's a picture of a sculpture
Yes.
of nude female conjoined twins on a rocking chair with their heads on fire. And
Yes.
it's a weird rocking chair. It's a sideways rocking chair, not a forward and backwards rocking chair.
Correct.
Um, this is something that Perry came up with in his dream. Sorry, very distracted right
which
now.
is a pretty weird.
Perry, yeah,
It's a pretty weird
It's already
dream.
a weird thing.
But then again,
Perry,
I wasn't doing any heroin.
Yeah, and he said of this quote: "The idea came from a dream I had. There were these two women swinging back and forth. They were joined at the hip and shoulder. Their hair was on fire. I just went from there, and Casey assisted me. We had a fellow come in to do plaster body casting of her. Then we made the twins' hair and headgear from pipe cleaners. You'll notice the chair rocks from side to side as opposed to back and forth. So we had to have this made specially. We also went shopping for fake eyeballs." As you do, you just go, let's go down to the fake eyeball shop and pick up some eyeballs.
I got one of those on every corner in LA, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, so
fake
to
eyeball
make this
shops.
The casting there was done by a guy named Paul Fisher, who's credited as castings on the cover. However, initially, neither Perry or Casey, his girlfriend, knew how to do this. So they hired somebody from Warner Brothers, some Warner Brothers employees, to create the sculptures. But after watching them for a couple of days and how they were going to do it, Perry was just like, fuck off, and fired them. And then they did it themselves. And then took credit for it. So, yeah. Very, very interesting choice on their part.
Yes, the cover naturally caused controversy.
Yeah.
And therefore,
it's two naked women, essentially, yeah.
And therefore, I wanted to have it.
Exactly. That to me is the thing when I'm reading about this, and it's like it said that 9 of the 11 leading record store chains refused to stock it due to the nudity depicted on the cover. So it was issued with a brown paper bag covering the album to try to get past that. That immediately you see that brown paper bag, you're like, what's going on inside of there?
What's inside that brown paper
records. Bag? I gotta get that. Which is crazy records. To me because it didn't at the time. It did really, really horribly in its first release. It didn't sell. I mean, in the first year, it sold, they think, I guess I shouldn't say horribly. It's like 200 to 250,000 copies, which is not, not nothing, but it's also not what you would expect. Over time, it took it 10 years to get to platinum status. So it's a pretty slow burner, but still very interesting that it was like such a controversial album cover. And at that time, I don't think one of the big interesting things about physical media around the year 2000, and I know this from firsthand because I actually worked there, was that Walmart had become the #1 seller of music in the United States. So if you were buying CDs or cassettes, they didn't sell vinyl at Walmart, but if you're buying CDs or cassettes around 2000, you were buying it. A lot of people were buying it from Walmart, and they had such a huge market share that they would actually control what albums could and couldn't be released. And they would also only carry, they wouldn't carry albums with the explicit rating on them. So
correct.
A lot of artists intentionally would be like, well, we're going to tone our songs down, or we're going to tone our album cover down, or we're going to do something to censor this so that they could get it on Walmart's shelves so they could sell it. It was at the time when I found out about it, I was literally working at Walmart at the time, and I got pissed.
Tell me that's not just total bullshit. That's awful.
It is. It's total bullshit. It's like monopolistic crap.
But censorship.
Yeah.
Hot garbage.
But, yeah, is what it is. But this album cover, I think, you look back at it today, it's become an absolute icon. And again, this kind of goes back to the thing I was talking about earlier. You look at this album cover, and to me, it has such a feeling of it's the mid-90s. And this was, 5, 6, like I said, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years before when I would have expected this album cover to come out.
Correct.
Very, very interesting that they were that far ahead of things.
So when did you start? When do you know of a point where you knew who or what this record was, or Jane's Addiction, or anything like that?
So kind of. I couldn't tell you if it was this record or their follow-up.
Yeah, Ritual.
Ritual Habitual. Thank you. I could never. That's another album I can never remember. But I remember in the 90s. A couple of my cousins who were a little bit older, late 90s, a little bit older than I was. One of them, my cousin Steve, actually worked at a Blockbuster Music
Mm-hmm.
I think that's come up once or twice on the show before, but because of that, he just had this massive CD collection and just listened to everything. And I do remember hearing Jane Says from this album on one of in his car or in his truck a couple of times driving around with him different places. So I think that was probably the first time it ever registered with me like, oh yeah, this is like an actual band. But as far as like actually hearing them and like contemplating like, oh yeah, this is like a band that makes music. There's something here that's escaping me right now, but uh, probably mid 2000s, kind of when I started to go back and actually appreciate all the music from the time I had been
Sure.
in my early teen years that I didn't appreciate at the time because it was just that was what everybody else was listening to, and I was off listening to like surf music and classical music and other stupid shit because I was that kind of a nerdy kid. But going back to listen to that, Jane's Addiction was a band that came up over and over and over again, including a lot of the bands from the 90s saying, oh, I was totally inspired by Jane's Addiction, or, oh, hey, uh, Nothing Shocking was a huge influence on the sound that we made or the way that we structured our band or the way that we, played our music. And then obviously Dave Navarro is somebody who kind of continued on through the 90s and, you know, did more and became a household name essentially. So
Pretty much, yeah. He's been around for a while. He's done a lot of
yeah.
cool stuff. So at the time this record was released, 1988, I was in a few bands at that point. The one that I spent most of my time with was a band called Legend of Rupert. We were all really good musicians for our age and like to consider ourselves savvy in music, whatever that meant. We thought it meant something, it probably didn't. So, whenever we were prepping for a dance that we had been hired for or for some sort of performance, we wanted to cover a broad array of genres, or at least form fit into the place we were playing. If we were playing the local public school near us, we steered more towards hair metal or classic rock. If we were playing some of the Catholic schools, we played more alternative rock. And I hate to generalize, but at the time in 1988 and 89, that was pretty accurate. That's how it was. As was our usual practice, we would gather together in our bass player's house to discuss set list changes and any recommendations. We would sit on the floor of his bedroom with a notepad, and we all brought tapes or CDs of what we were thinking. There was a lot of give and take. No, I don't want to learn another goddamn REM song. I think Stand or Orange Crush or Superman was plenty. Why the hell do I have to learn more? Or this is a weird song. We're playing a dance, right? We want people to dance, right? So no Rush, Matthew. Fuck you. I did manage to squeak one Rush song into the set list, though, Superconductor off of Presto, so I felt proud about that. So this time, we were sitting there with our lists, and Dan turned to his brother Sean, who was the singer of the band, and said, play him the one we were talking about. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And it was Mountain Song off this record. And I was blown away. I had never heard anything like it. There was power. There was this quirky, very uncomfortable voice. The mix was outstanding. Who the fuck is this? Jane's Addiction. Who the hell is Jane's Addiction? What is that? It was eye-opening because it set a lot of music exploration into motion. This album just became one of those albums that I wore the hell out of at home. I used to get super high and listen to it on the floor of my bedroom with headphones on, and the opening of the album blows across you, washes over you like a wave. It was an experience. Dark room, headphones on, flat on the floor, and it's like, holy shit, because there's so much power and drama in these songs that Perry puts in, and it's strange. It's one of my very favorite records from that period, and I'm thrilled to be talking about it today because it's a good record.
I'm happy we get to do it then. This is cool. It's like I said, Jane's Addiction is one of those bands that like I know about them, but they get so washed out for me. Just, and I don't think about them very often, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh yeah, I should go back and listen to that."
Because there's honestly two good records. They released two more that aren't good, that did nothing. But there's two good records, and unless you're digging back, and you'll hear been caught stealing on the radio. You'll hear Jane Says on the radio. You're not going to hear Had a Dad on the radio. You're not going to hear Classic Girl or 3 Days off Ritual on the radio, even though you should. And so unless you're doing that work, you're not going to get it from listening to Kettle Whistle. You're not going to get the same sounds listening to Porno for Pyros. It's just, these are completely different bands. So, yeah, I mean, unless you're aware of it, and some people are, then you're probably not going to hear it. So you want to take a break and come back, do track by track?
Yeah, let's do that. We'll talk to everybody in a second.
Today's show is brought to you by Atomic Podcast Services. Are you tired of spending hours hunched over your computer struggling to edit your podcast episodes? Do you want more time to create instead of editing? Well, we have the solution for you. Introducing Atomic Podcast Services, a premium podcast editing service that will take your show to the next level.
With Atomic Podcast Services, you can say goodbye to tedious editing tasks and hello to a polished, professional-sounding podcast. They will expertly enhance your audio quality, seamlessly remove background noise, and ensure every episode sounds crystal clear. But that's not all. As part of their premium service, they will also help you with ID3 tagging, scheduling, and posting of episodes, and for a little extra, even create engaging audiograms to promote your episodes on social media platforms. There's even a discount if you subscribe to their monthly services. With Atomic Podcast Services, you'll have more time to focus on what you do best, creating incredible content.
So why waste another minute struggling with complex editing software? Let Atomic Podcast Services take care of the technical side while you focus on captivating your audience. Visit their website at atomicpods, that's pods with a Z.com, to learn more and book your editing session today. Hello, this is Matthew from Audio Judo. Are you looking for additional Audio Judo content? Stuff that will make you laugh with an emphasis on music? Then you need to subscribe to our Patreon page, and this is how you do it. First thing, head to our site, patreon.com/audiojudo. Our Patreon site is the only place you're going to find all the extras that we work so hard to provide. There are Judo Chops, which are mini episodes. There are bits that are taken out of episodes for whatever reasons. Some bloopers, some full interviews with artists like Steve Hackett from Genesis. We have 3 tiers currently. There is the Shout It Out Loud tier, which would only cost you $1 in the US. For that amount, you get a shout out by name at the end of each episode. For $5 a month, little step up, the front row tier, you get a shout out on each episode, early access to full episodes, and access to all the bonus content. With a more significant investment, $20 a month, the backstage pass tier, you get everything that is available at the other tiers, a special personalized gift from Kyle and I. Most importantly, after paying for 1 year, you get to host an episode of Audio Judo with me and Kyle on the album of your choosing. We have completed several of these. They're a ton of fun. You can find the link to our Patreon account on our website, audiojudo.com. But if you can't find it there, it is patreon.com/audiojudo. Thanks for subscribing. And now back to the pro.
Hey, we're back.
Yeah.
Up the Beach.
Up your beach, pal.
Just one of the greatest opening moments in alternative rock and roll. The bass line
This is
starts it
really good.
off. This is something that I think we'll come back to again and again. How many songs on this record were started by the bass and or written
Mhm.
by Eric Avery? I don't think I really thought about it back then. I knew it sounded, I just knew the song sounded different. But I think that was a major reason why. It doesn't start with guitar, it starts with bass. And then you get this really small hitch of a breath, like Perry came in too early. And then, bam, this very strange, loud, crashing chord. It's so different and original that it's very attention grabbing. The song is essentially an instrumental opening with some very odd vocalizations by Perry. The only discernible
Yeah.
words in the song being home
Eh.
and here we go now.
There were, if you go to like geniuslyrics.com, there are lyrics for it, but they're
But
more like
bullshit.
moaned
Yeah.
than anything else.
And this is one of the things you have to know, get used to with Perry, his affinity for screwing with journalists or fans or whomever, because in interviews over the years, he has said, uh, alternatively, he has said that this song is about the JFK assassination
Mm-hmm.
or alternatively, heroin abuse. Perry, there are 5 words in the song. What are you talking about? What? His goal was just to get people thinking, or he was terribly stoned most of the time.
Probably more likely.
But for me, it's just more of a here we go type moment. This feels just like a here we go. And it sounds like this. it's it's such a great start to a record.
It is. I always wonder too when we see albums like this that have like a little intro track. Why wasn't this more common? Like I understand sometimes there were economic reasons where they're like, no, fuck it, top load all the hits, put the hit on the first track on the A side, first track on the B side, and then whatever. But like, why isn't this more common as like if you're making an album to be like a complete piece of art? Why aren't there more albums that have like an intro and an outro to them?
I think it depends on the style that you're listening to. I know progressive stuff like that will typically
Mm-hmm.
do and what would be considered an overture or
Okay.
something to set the table, an opening. And honestly, they kind of get tired after a while. They kind of get played, and you're like, let's just start it. And so it really depends on the style. Uh, yeah, rap also did it a lot during the '90s. That's true. That do an intro type
Yeah.
song, but yeah, I don't know. It has to be done well.
Hmm.
I think if you
Guess
do
that's
it and
true.
it sucks, you're like, why are you doing that? Just start the damn record already.
God, why do they put an intro on every one of their albums that sucks?
I don't need 2.5 minutes of warbling. Let's just get to it. And then you get to the second song, Ocean Size, right? Beautiful little
Yeah.
guitar interlude at the beginning, very classic rock focused. Starts the song and you're like, that doesn't sound like the first song at all. I was duped into thinking this album was something else. And then you get the strained wail of someone yelling 3-4 and the whole scene changes. It's a whole different song. It's a great, very oddly constructed bruiser of a tune, and it's really the first indication of how excellent a guitarist Dave Navarro really is.
Yeah.
He's homegrown. As I mentioned, he doesn't get spoken about very often as a heralded player. But this album and Ritual that follows are kind of showcases for how gifted he really is. There are so many styles played on this album. And the solo in this song is an excellent piece. This song was the third single released from the record. Didn't do much on the charts, but it's an absolute live concert staple. In fact, this was the song the band was playing a few months ago when they violently broke up on stage. Perry was under the influence, as he typically was, and was pissed about something that Dave was playing, went over to him mid-show, started pushing him and yelling, "I'm going to fucking kill you."
Yeah.
And had to be restrained by several stagehands. It's all on video, so go ahead and look it up. It's all very super nuts, but that's Perry. And naturally, Dave wants nothing more to do with him, and I don't blame him.
Yeah.
That's the experience. Like, that. What are you going to do? This song is about, according to the band's website, being homeless, something that Farrell experienced briefly when he moved to LA in the late 70s.
Well, I mean, he wrote this song supposedly while he was living in his car on the streets.
That's what he
of LA,
says, yes.
Or at least the seeds to it.
Yeah.
He actually moved out here just to surf. Like, he had no plans. He's just like, yeah, fuck it, I'm gonna go to California and surf for a while. Mm-hmm. Both of those things sort of like, I mean, what am I trying to say here? The fact that he was living in his car, totally homeless, but also that he was being a surfer, I think you really see both of those come through here. So there's this homeless young kid who wants more power, who wants to grow up and gain more power and gain more money and gain more respect. And what's the most powerful thing he knows about? It's the ocean. It's one of the most powerful things in the world. And if you don't respect that as a surfer, you die pretty quickly or get injured, because you have to know, like, hey, if I screw around with this, it's unforgiving. It's going to destroy me. And he kind of pulls that out in this song. I really like the lyrics. Wish I was ocean size. They cannot move you, man. No one tries. No one pulls you out from your hole like a tooth aching a jawbone. Probably, there you go. That one really stood out to me, so I'm glad you picked it too. Yeah, it's an interesting song. I like it a lot, and I like that it's something very personal for him.
Yeah, to me, it's about being immovable. So big, so massive in your opinions that no one can change it, no matter how hard they try to change your opinions. And those lines are excellent. He's a good lyricist when he's good. He's weird, but good. Sometimes he's a little out there for me. But then he delivers this gem, and it's kind of hard to deny. So the song and the solo and the solo and the solo sound like this. It's great work. He makes good use of a lot of pedals. It's like wah and reverb and echo. God bless him. He's throwing the kitchen sink at this fucking song, and somehow it works really effectively.
Yeah.
Had a dad? Give me straight, strong riff. They can do that too. They can do a straight, strong riff too. Perfectly executed song with a story as old as time in rock and roll. Your dad took off. Boo-hoo. And in this case, with Eric Avery, the songwriter on this tune, you come to find out the guy that had been raising you, the guy that just left, wasn't really your biological dad at all. Yeah, that's a lot to digest at one time. But then leave it to Perry to take Eric's story and essentially weave into it a bunch of Nietzsche's nihilism. God is dead. A line taken directly from Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche about the moral decay of society after the Reformation. His theory was that all of Western civilization was created as a platform for Christianity and its principles and morals, and that the Reformation was putting man as the central focus, not God, and that would lead to moral degradation and people not being fearful of repercussions by a vengeful God. Therefore, God is dead. And Perry takes the dad leaving and equates it to that, saying, who's going to keep little Eric on the straight and narrow if there's no dad around? And the lines, if you see my dad, tell him my brothers all gone mad, they're beating on each other. I walked around, even tried to call, got that funny feeling, God is dead. He's not there at all. Fuck yes, Perry. That's how you win hearts and minds in the music world, especially with angsty adolescent boys like me. You bag religion and you win.
However, there's always a however.
Yes.
That lyric may actually be God is dad.
He said that in an interview, and I say bullshit to that.
So here's the thing, though. Oh God, this mic. I changed the position of the mic tonight because I was going to try something a little bit different because I was thinking, oh, this will be easier and I'll be able to get it a little bit closer with that. But unfortunately, my mic stand is so big that where I normally wave my hands around because I talk a lot with my hands, I keep smacking into the bottom of it. So sorry, Randy. Anyways.
Yes, go on.
Late 1988, spoken word performance at the Roxy here in LA. Perry was talking about the state of the world, and on stage with him, he had this prop phone, and it starts ringing. He answers it, and obviously you can only hear one side of the conversation, but he says, no, Mr. Record Producer, I'm not singing God is Dead in that song. It's God is Dad. And then he hangs up. Shortly after that, the phone rings again. Perry answered and said, oh, hello, Dad. No, I'm sort of busy, Dad. I have people over. I'll talk to you later, and then hangs up. So
I don't buy it.
Potentially, I mean, again, it's one of those things where, like you said, he likes to screw with people. So maybe this really is him screwing with people. Maybe it's him having fun, but also maybe this is how he intended it originally. Who knows?
Sounds like this. Sounds like this. First of all, we talked about this. This album is mixed really well. Mm-hmm. It has balls, something that albums were supremely lacking in the 80s, as we have talked about ad nausea. Dave Jordan did excellent work on the mix, but also this band was remarkably tight and loose at the same time. The rhythm section was so strong, so rock solid underneath that it gave Dave Navarro a chance to kind of cut loose and be really sloppy with his playing, because there was a place to go. And Farrell just kind of he liked to explore dynamically what he could do with his voice, just screaming, making up words and whatever. This flavor of music was so much different than anything coming out at that time. The same this summer of 88, OU 812 by Van Halen, Rattle and Hum by U2. There was a Poison album. There was a Bon Jovi album. These albums weren't taking any chances. They were fine in their own right, but we're getting to the point that we wanted something new, something a little dangerous. And this was taking chances that where records weren't taking chances. And I think that's why it appealed to a lot of people. Here's a fun little connection for you. So we did an episode about Nine Inch Nails a little while ago.
I had this one too, yeah.
Did you? Okay. And we talked about how many samples that Trent Reznor used on that record. And he used the Booga Booga at the beginning of the song, was sampled on Ring Finger. And that one actually heard. Unlike most of the other ones that you couldn't hear.
You can actually pull that one out. He did also sample a drum fill from this song, and he uses it as a guitar loop for its same pattern.
Oh, weird. And this is only like, he was working on that record maybe 3 months after this record was after this one was released. It's a pretty tight window.
Right? I always wonder with stuff like that too. Like, do you think he got like masters of this from somewhere? Like, when you work in the music industry, can you just be like, hey, send me the master of that so I can listen to it, and then
I don't know.
took
I
shit
can't
off of
remember
it?
who Trent was signed to. I feel like it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be
Yeah, I would
cross
get.
labels.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true. Huh? It wouldn't be like, yeah, I work for, you know, Sony, and you work for Warner Brothers. Send me all your tracks. That
Yeah, I don't
probably
think
wouldn't
that's
work.
happening.
But yeah,
Ted.
or I
Oh,
wonder
good.
if it's just something that I was saying. I wonder if it's just something he pulled off of a CD. But
Yeah, he must have. He's probably just listening
yeah,
to it. And I'm sure it got around. Ted just admit
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And
A
this
song
was,
about everybody's friend,
yep,
serial killer Ted Bundy.
this was the song that sealed the deal for me.
Hmm.
This was like anything else I had heard up to that time, and music maybe changing, and at the very least, my musical landscape was changing at this time. As you said, it's about Ted Bundy. Actually, includes audio from Ted Bundy.
Mm-hmm.
One of the many times he denied having anything to do with his killings. He was ultimately convicted and executed for 1989. But the crux of the song uh, is that while yes, he denies the crimes in the clip, the song is really about his admission of guilt in his final jailhouse interview. Right before he was executed, he had an interview with the founder of the religious group Focus on the Family, James Dobson, another guy who isn't a serial killer but is no saint. In the interview, Bundy finally admits his guilt but blames the killings on his addiction to pornography. And the lyrics to the song are an examination of just that. The line repeated over and over again in the song is "sex is violent." And Bundy had this to say about it. He said, "The most damaging kind of pornography, and I'm talking from hard, real personal experience, is that involves violence and sexual violence. The wedding of these two forces, as I know only too well, brings about behavior that is too terrible to describe." Once you become addicted to it, and I look at this as a kind of addiction, you look for more potent, more explicit, more graphic kind of material. Like an addiction, you keep craving something which is harder and gives you a greater sense of excitement until you reach the point where the pornography only goes so far. That jumping off point where you begin to think maybe actually doing it will give you that which is just beyond reading about it and looking at it. And it's really eye-opening to hear a rock band give a lesson in desensitization, whether that be sexual or violent images on TV. And then you add this swirling, melting pot of music that just moves around this whole song, kind of lumbering along with it until it all coalesces towards the end. The song itself, if you listen to it from beginning to end, is very sexual. It has a slow build, and it kind of builds into a rhythm for a bit and then reaches a peak and then kind of falls apart at the end.
Yeah.
This is part of Ted Just Admit It right here.
Sex is violent. 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 Go!
It's a lot.
It is. This whole song is a lot. It's a very it's kind of a different vibe, obviously, from the beginning of the album already. It starts out really slow, and you immediately know this is something different. It does give you, like you said, because of the way that the music is structured in it. I never thought about it kind of matching the rhythm of Sex, where it starts out kind of slow and then gets faster and faster and faster, and then it just falls apart at the end.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I didn't ever thought of it about Sex because it's way too long for me. Second of all,
sorry, John.
ding. No, but It's definitely, I never thought about that before, but to me it also, it's a very, like, the rhythms of this song are very uncomfortable.
Mm.
They're very, like, this is not something you just would want to sit and listen to, in my opinion, regularly, because it sort
No.
of, it gives you that uncomfortable feeling. And then when you start to realize, oh, this is about Ted Bundy, this is about murder and violence and pornography, and it starts to give you that feeling of like, oh yeah, this was intentionally made to make you feel uncomfortable.
Right.
um, so much so that they actually used this, they used an alternate version of this on the soundtrack for Natural Born Killers, which is a movie about two serial killers, husband and wife serial killers, or I think maybe their boyfriend and girlfriend, I forget. But anyways, but they actually took the part with Ted Bundy talking and replaced it with some lines from Screaming Jay Hawkins' hit song "I Put a Spell on You." And it's a really cool version
Yeah.
of this song, and go check it out sometime if you've never heard it before. But it's a really interesting choice to take it and not even go to the place that they went with Ted Bundy, to take it in a slightly different direction, but it still has that, uncomfortable feeling to it.
It's
This
a
track-
powerful
Oh,
song.
go ahead.
Yeah, go
It
ahead.
is. It also gives us the name for the album, Nothing's Shocking. Specifically here, Perry talked about how the Ted Bundy trial was going on when he was a kid, and it was all over television, and everybody was just constantly talking about the details of it and the details of it and the details of it. And he started to realize, even as a kid, like, these are horrible, violent things that people are talking about, and nobody's shocked by it anymore. They're eating their TV dinners and watching it on television, and just
In fact, if anything, they're more
know,
intrigued than ever. They're
exactly,
more
they want to
interested
know
than
more.
ever.
They want to learn more about it, and nothing's shocking to us anymore.
That's that desensitization, and people were influenced by it. Several years later, you talk about grunge. 10 years later, the band Bush recorded the song "Everything Zen," and it has
Yeah.
the line in there, "There's no sex in your violence," which was a direct response to Perry Farrell's lyric, and that he was influenced by. It also has a line that my bandmates and I would use for the next few years at every opportunity. The line was, "I am the killer of people. You look like a meatball." So whenever we could use the term "you look like a meatball," we certainly did. Also, the next line, "I ask for your forgiveness," was also a great play on those words. He doesn't want you to forgive him at all. He wants you to give him everything. But the way this is structured within the song, "I ask for your forgiveness," is just so well done. It's very smart.
Yeah.
That's a great song. Uncomfortable? Yes. But great.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Standing in the shower, ... Thinking?
My favorite place to think, actually.
The song is so good. It's so strange, right? Coming off the serious topic of serial killers and nihilism of the past two songs, we get a simple narrated song about taking a piss in the shower while wrapped in thought.
Yeah, I like that this is sort of split into three sections too. So it is literally Perry. The narrative here is Perry's literally taking a shower, and he starts thinking about things. And the first thing he starts thinking about is power and what makes a man, and what makes a good person. And he realizes he's, like you said, he starts pissing in the shower, and he realizes he's so lost in thought he doesn't even realize he's doing it. So he comes back to it, and he's washing himself, and then he starts to think again, and he starts to think about death and how it eventually comes for everybody, and we all die. And then he realizes, I'm still in the shower, and the water's really hot, and I got to keep going, and I got to get done in here. And then he loses himself in thought again. He starts to think about how his girlfriend, is she with him because she wants to be with him, and he gives her something she needs, or is she there because she's afraid to leave him, or is she afraid of him? And then all of a sudden he realizes he's still in the shower, and he gets back to it and finishes the shower.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's a fun song.
3 parts, completely disconnected stories,
Mm-hmm.
which is how your brain works. You're not thinking linear. You think like, I'm thinking about that, and then I'm thinking about that, and then I'm thinking about that. And where the hell was I? Oh yeah, I'm in the shower, and I got hot water pouring on me. Okay. And the music's fabulous for the song. The guitar work is so good. Production throws in these warps and phases that ramp it up. And I will even excuse the very cliche yelling of... Go ahead. Guitar
Guitar.
is correct. It's a great song.
Yeah.
You don't like it, do you?
No, I do actually like it a lot. It's fun, and like I said, I like that it's very upbeat, and it really pulls you out of that like depressing slump from the previous song. So, uh,
Summertime
s-
Rolls.
yeah. Oh, here comes a little psychedelic number right in the middle of the album. I like it.
Does it not seem remarkably out of place on this album because of the
It does
stark
seem.
stylistic contrast from the last
It
two
does.
songs? But it's
It
actually
does
more
seem.
in line with where they were headed.
Mm-hmm.
On the next record, the first side of Ritual, they're all bangers, but the second side of the album was more an experiment in progressive and art rock, like this song is. This song,
There's.
go ahead.
Oh, I would say there's a lot of hints that this was written either while on ecstasy or shortly afterwards, describing the effects of ecstasy.
Oh yeah,
Um, I would totally believe that. I should have probably looked up when ecstasy started to actually infiltrate the drug market and when it became an actual drug, but I'd read that in two different spots. So I'm
I
like, all
thought it
right,
was just
that's a
called
definite
something else
possibility. It could have
before.
been. But it also gives me a really strong like that 60s Beatles Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds kind of vibe. And a lot of the like just a lot of the like psychedelic bands, they really took that and ran with it here, but it's also not so far into that it doesn't, it's not a rock song, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get it. It's written by Eric Avery. He wrote
Hmm.
bass. The bass kind of provides the pulse for the whole song. Just
Yeah.
kind of moves it along, and then you add in some of Perry's strangest but beautiful lyrics. It's a great
Hmm.
song. According to the band, many people have used this song as their wedding song, and
I can see that.
it is pretty, but I don't know that I would go that far. It's pretty for sure, and it sounds like this.
Me and my girlfriend don't wear no shoes. Her nose is painted pepper sunlight. She loves me, I mean it's serious, as serious can be. Well, she sings a song and I listen to what it says.
And so, in a number of chat rooms dedicated to Jane's addiction, many people believe that this song is about oral sex. In fact, someone devoted a chapter in their book to it. Sarah Beth Purcell wrote about it in her book, Love is the Drug, a novel. And I'm sorry, I just don't see it. Maybe I am interpreting a little too on the nose, but when I kind of break the lyrics apart, it seems like it's about a summer day spent at the park and just kind of lazily drifting the day away. There doesn't seem to be anything like that. They're just kind of hanging out, and
So
it's a
you're
beautiful day.
you're suggesting a summer day at the park couldn't involve a blowjob, Matthew?
Wait, whoa! I didn't say that. Just saying, it isn't necessarily about that.
Okay, not
And
100%.
Not
It's not.
100%.
It's not a 12-hour long day at the park that was just a blowjob.
Wow.
Going for the record.
Wow. I absolutely love the line, her nose is painted peppered sunlight, which I
Yeah.
think is the most beautiful way to say that someone has freckles on their nose.
That is nice.
It is like painted pepper sunlight. I'm like, I remember hearing that at 16 going, that's really pretty. It's just a really cool way to say that. Why didn't I think of that?
I did also wonder if that wasn't another Beatles reference, but I couldn't directly.
Sergeant Pepper,
Sergeant Pepper's,
I see what you're doing.
or like Pepperland Laid to Waste, and I couldn't quite
Hmm.
draw. I couldn't quite link those two together, so I was like, I'm not going to mention it. But
Well, good effort.
since you
Good
brought
try.
it up,
Good try. Mountain Song?
Mountain Song.
Hell yes.
Yeah, this one was actually written by Eric Avery and Perry Farrell before forming Jane's Addiction, supposedly. Originally released on the 1986 soundtrack for the film Dudes, but re-recorded for this release. The original is in a much lower key. The original recording can actually be heard on the 1997 compilation slash alts album Kettle Whistle that you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
So if you want to hear that version, you certainly can. And I think we already mentioned a little bit, but due to graphic nudity, MTV would not play this music video. They just wouldn't. So it didn't, this is one of the reasons why the album struggled to take off, was because the music video just wouldn't get any play. So Perry actually helped to edit together 20 minutes of additional footage that they shot when they were making the music video, and they released it on home video under the title Soul Kiss as a little short. It's I think the runtime's about 24 minutes, if I remember correctly, but interesting little video.
Are you familiar with the movie Dudes starring John Cryer? I had
Not
to look
at
it
all.
up. I had to look it up.
I did too.
Description is as follows. 3 punk-loving New York City dudes need a change and drive a VW Beetle to California. After rednecks kill one of them in Arizona, they want justice. A cute girl helps them. That's the description.
Wow.
It also starred Red Hot Chili Peppers bassist Flea, who
Oh,
we will talk again about shortly.
yeah,
And it
we
was
will.
directed by Penelope Spheris, who most notably directed the Wayne's World movies.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So while Ted Just Admit It was a song that kind of sealed the deal for my interest in the band, this was the first thing I heard, and it was a powerful statement to say the least. The opening bass riff and the build to Perry screaming coming down the mountain was so impactful for me, and I've loved playing this song for years, and listening to it even more sounds like this.
Coming down the mountain, one of many children. Everybody has their own opinion. Everybody has their own opinion. Holding it back hurts so bad. Jump one out of my flesh and I'll slay ya. Yes, yeah.
So the song was named the 71st best hard rock song of all time by VH1, clearly the keeper of all things hard rock. The song's lyrics talk about how everyone thinks differently and holds different opinions from those around them. Allegedly, the song is about Perry wanting to stop using heroin, which I think could just be about every song on the record to some degree. Either wanting to use it or to stop using it. And I can see it with the cash in line, a line that we used to use at each other all the time back in the days when we were strung out on one thing or another. Bad trip, bad weed, someone's freaking out, better cash in. As in, go to sleep, my brother. Go lay down somewhere. Cash in the chips. Your
Sleep
day's
it
done.
off.
Your day's done. Cash in. It's a good song.
This is a really good song. This is a really good song. And I can't believe this one doesn't get more radio play.
Agreed.
Like, I haven't heard this song, I think, ever on the radio, maybe. So, but
I can't remember.
it's a
the
great
time, but
song.
I probably did in the early 90s, but not since then. Idiots Rule?
They do. But as you mentioned, Flea,
Yeah.
just previously from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, playing trumpet here on this track. Angelo Moore of the ska band Fishbone playing sax. And Christopher Dowd, also from Fishbone, playing trombone here.
Right?
This is a very different tonal change
Yeah.
for the album for one track only again.
This song has always been super cool to me because it has something that I never would have expected on an alternative song in the 1980s, at least not one that rocked as hard as this one up to this point, and that is a horn section. And if you're going to put a horn section together, you might as well make it a good one and call in your friends.
Mhm.
Flea's original instrument was the trumpet, not the bass.
Yeah.
So, and he was very accomplished on the trumpet. and then you bring in the Fishbone guys, all super accomplished players, and it just adds this weird, quirky punch to the song. Sounds like this. Go ahead.
I was saying, in case anybody out there couldn't tell, this is a song about how people who seem to be in charge are idiots.
Yes.
The lyrics specifically talk about how the ruling class gets to forget all the rules and do whatever the hell they want, while the rest of us are stuck living under their idiot rules.
Yes,
and
idiot
I
rules.
thought long
Idiots
and
rule.
hard for the last few days, Matthew, to try to come up with a real world example of this in early February 2025 that I could relate to everybody. And I couldn't do it.
You're struggling, aren't you?
I was struggling. There's just not a time right now where I
There's
can
not a
think
good
of anything
example.
happening. No, so sorry everybody.
So I tried like hell to convince our high school jazz band to do a modified version of this for a school concert.
Oh, that would have been great.
But I couldn't do it. I think they weren't that excited for the cursing at the song, or for all the cursing at the end of the song. And the best I could do was convince them to do "Bonin' in a Boneyard" by Fishbone without announcing the name of the song to the crowd. I tried. I had to settle for more Fishbone funk than Jane's Addiction, but I tried.
Is it one of those things where they were just like, no, this next song is a Boneyard?
Now they said something to the effect of a few guys from the jazz band also have a band outside of here. They're gonna play a number for you.
Oh,
so we played a number for them during the spaghetti dinner.
Ooh.
Bonin' in a Boneyard during the spaghetti dinner. Keeping it classy.
Ooh la la.
Yeah. Jane says.
Jane says.
See? Everybody knows it.
Everybody knows the song. Even if you don't know any other part of this song, you know that part of it. And that line gets stuck in my head all the time. Whenever I meet someone named Jane, I have a very hard time not being like, Jane says. Like, I can't. It's hard. I actually have to concentrate and be like, no, don't do that. They might not know the song. It might not be funny.
It's still funny.
It's like, yeah, it's a little funny, but
it was
written by.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I would say written by Eric Avery. No, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Oh, written by Eric Avery. It originally appeared on their previous, the live album that we spoke about, that was re-recorded here with steel drum added, which I thought was a little bit weird. Now that I know that that's there, I can't unhear it.
Yeah,
so,
replace the bongos from the live version with steel drums.
Steel drums. Jane Bainter, like we already mentioned once, was the roommate of Eric and Perry, who was their muse and inspiration for a lot of their songs. They got their name from that. And obviously here, same Jane who they're talking about. She was actually an addict who was dating an abusive drug dealer named Sergio, who we'll hear about in the song. Mm-hmm. Unlike a lot of addicts, though, during the day, Jane would put on, business casual workwear and go to a job at a consulting firm in Century City. She lived out a normal working day and apparently never lost this job, by the way. She ended up quitting years later, but never lost that job due to drugs and stuff. And then at night she would come home, throw on a wig and go out and go to the underground music scene in LA all night.
Yeah.
And then, and not like, oh, I'll go and have a couple of drinks and, no, like I'll go and do heroin and,
lots of it,
tons of heroin, and go out and, have a night of myself and then come home and sleep for 15 minutes and then get up and go to work the next day.
Who can't do that?
Right. There's also a line in here about Jane hoping to move to Spain.
Yes.
That's actually another true thing. Jane said in an article on grunge.com by Brian Boone and Amy Beeman, quote, "My parents divorced and my mother and her new husband bought this house in the south of Spain. I had the opportunity to go over there, but I couldn't because I was too strung out."
Yes, but she eventually got clean
Yes.
and did go to Spain.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
good
there's
for
an
her.
awesome there's an awesome article, by the way, about all of this on Far Out's website by Kelly Scanlon, titled
Mhm.
"Jane Bainter: The Real Life Jane Who Inspired Jane's Addiction." But she covers all the history with the band and Jane, and also at the end, I was a little disappointed. At the end kind of just wraps it up, and she's just like, "And now she's clean and living a good life." And it's like, I wanted more information,
No,
but
that's all you get.
yeah,
Just
that's all
wrap
we
it up
get.
into a tidy little package. Done.
Yeah.
She's
But apparently
fine.
she's okay and she's living a life now. So
Yeah. And Jane says the song sounds like this.
Jane says, have you seen my wig around? I feel naked without it. She knows they all want her to go. But that's okay, man, she don't like them anyway. Jane says I'm going away to Spain when I get my money saved. Gonna start tomorrow.
So Perry tells the story this way, and always take Perry's stories with a grain of salt because he has told several different versions of this story through the years. So he said, around 1984, I rented a big house on Wilton near Hancock Park, right in the heart of everything good in Hollywood, but the whole neighborhood seemed deteriorated. I deceived the landlord into thinking I was a gay interior decorator rather than a punk rocker, and one of my housemates was Jane, this strangely beautiful, well-to-do girl who got caught up in the drug scene and fell in love with a dealer named Sergio. Jane was an intellectual and knew how to act aristocratic, even with a needle and a spoon on the table. I'm not sure if the song mythologized the neighborhood, St. Andrew's Place is nothing special to look at, but I do think it glamorized her life in a way. That was a great time, though. When the landlord found out I wasn't a gay interior decorator, he came after me with a gun. That's the whole story. That's the story. That's it.
I love he seems to have a habit of doing that, ending his stories on a weird little like, and then we found an eyeball store, or and then the landlord came after me with a gun, and that just ends. And you're
Right,
like,
and everyone's like, "What? Is it?
and he
Keep
shot
going.
at you,
He
or
shot you. You ran
you
away.
had to run away, or
You tripped and fell into mud. Like something. Finish the story, damn it." Nope, that's it. That's it.
that's it.
He came after me with a gun. End scene.
Ugh. And cut. Okay.
It's a good song. It's a
It
popular
is.
song. If you say Jane's addiction to people, they either come up with that one or been caught stealing. That's
Yeah.
really the end of it, and that's okay. There is more. Thank you, boys.
Ugh.
A nearly
What i-
wordless swinging jazz piece.
what is this doing here? What, like, because this was the original closer for
Yeah.
for the vinyl. This is the closing track.
Now, if this
And-
is the closer, I'm fine with it
Okay.
because it's
Interesting.
just perfectly placed at the end of the record. It's almost like a tag at the end.
Sure.
Just an end. I mean, whatever.
Yeah, it's so weird to me, and it's so out of place. It reminds me a lot of Tools intermission from
You're talking about the
from-
intermission. Yeah.
yeah, from I can never pronounce the album, Anima.
Oh, Anima. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun. It's like their intermissions like this fun little quirky thing that, like, if you're just listening to the album from beginning to end, all of a sudden you're like, what the hell is this? And then it's like right in the middle too. So you're like, what
Yep.
the hell is this? And then all of a sudden it goes on and you're like, oh, okay. Here, because like you said, it's kind of a tag at the end, and it just, I don't know, it doesn't feel right to me. But
Well, here's 15 seconds of it. You tell me.
yeah. That that song has absolutely been played in the background of like swingers parties. There's no doubt in my mind. Like, people are putting keys in a fish bowl, and like, hey, I got a martini.
Is
Ah.
this the new Jane's Addiction?
Yeah, that was great.
Pigs.
So, am I gonna fuck your wife tonight? All right.
Pigs and Zen?
Pigs in Zen.
Mm.
Yeah, this one did not appear on the vinyl release, so it was cassette and CD only. It did also appear on their previous album with a different spoken interlude.
Uh-huh.
So, but obviously re-recorded for here.
It fits in really well with the rest of the record, sound-wise. It
Mhm.
sounds like the rest of the record. Same kind of heavy thumping bass, great guitar work. This song has always cracked me up because of that bridge near the end of the song. It's so strangely placed that my bass player, Dan, and I knew this bridge word for word, second for second, because it was just so weird and unintentionally hilarious. Here it is right here.
Yes, so roses are red. I made up the rest. If you got some big fucking secret, then why don't you sing me something? I'm in the midst of a trauma. Leave a message, I'll call you back. Leave it by the bed. Some people should die. That's just unconscious knowledge. Because the bigger you get, the wider you spread. You gotta depend on me. Now your vision is dead. The more your dream is dead. Vision. They get sucked from my eye. Like an eagle's
It's just so nonsensical.
Oh man, that definitely sounds like a heroin rant to me.
Not sure how
Just-
high he was or if he was just trying to sound like he was that high. It was so ridiculous. We learned every bit of that. And we would pass each other in the hallways at school. And some people should die. That's just unconscious knowledge. So stupid. Oh my God.
That absolutely reminds me. Have you ever? Patton Oswalt does this bit where he saw this guy come into an open mic night many, many, many years ago. This is probably in the '80s now. Where the guy's name was Dr. Pepper, but he gets up on stage and tells a story. But the guy is so strung out on heroin that he keeps dozing off. But he's still telling the story in his head, and he keeps waking up with different parts of the story. Go look up the video of it sometime.
Okay.
It's really, really funny. Patton Oswalt does the bit verbatim, though, including the falling asleep parts. But it's where the line, "Man, you wouldn't give a crippled crab a crutch" comes from. And it's one of my favorite lines that he says. But anyways, yeah, but it absolutely, he talks about how he was strung out on heroin and just, was a lot of it was just rambling and him trying to tell this rambling story. This absolutely reminds me of that.
It's hilarious. Unintentionally, absolutely hilarious. And it's a good song to boot, but that part just destroys me still when I hear it. And that's Nothing Shocking by Jane's Addiction. It's a fabulous artifact from 1988. It's just a great record. And unfortunately, not as many people have listened to it as I think should have.
Yeah. I definitely think it's one of those, it's another one of those albums that, like I said, I forget about it all the time. And then I hear about it again and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a great album. I should listen to that again. I think there's so many of those hidden gems still to go for us to find from the 70s and 80s and 90s. And probably past that too. Just, that's kind of where, for me, my musical knowledge stops. I actually have to do research to anything past 2005. So,
well, you've dug pretty deep.
It's true.
You've dug pretty deep. It's good stuff.
But
I've seen the schedule coming up, and it's pretty much every
diverse.
Pretty much every decade's touched there.
It's diverse, equitable, and inclusive, Matthew. So watch out.
Hold on.
Watch out.
Careful. So we want to know what you guys hear, or want to hear, or like to hear. Talk.
Talk hard sometime.
If you enjoyed listening to Jane's Addiction, what you know about this record, give us a text. No, not a text. God damn. An email.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah. That's, in all honesty, email is the best way to get a hold of us. info@audiojudo.com. We love getting emails. That one from Simon at the beginning of this was
Yeah,
fantastic.
I feel like I just
Thank you
hit my
again for
head or
that,
something.
Simon. Wow.
Yeah, I don't know what
Sound of a
happened.
stroke, everybody.
But you can get a hold of us. Email info@audiojudo.com, or you can find us on Facebook at Facebook.com/audiojudo, or Instagram at audio_judo.
Mm.
We will, or we can find us on YouTube, youtube.com/@audiojudo, and find
Cool.
what we have recorded on there. You have shout outs, do you know?
I do. Shout out to our patrons. Let's start at the backstage pass here. David W., Kristen K., Michael A.,
Oh.
Michael S., and Scott K. all in the backstage pass tier.
That's tasty.
Thank you all so much. John R. at the front row seats tier, thank you so much. And Diane and Simon C., our UK consultant, thank you both so much. And thank you again, Simon, for the real life feedback. That was fantastic.
That's a chef's kiss right there. Mm.
Right?
So we have albums coming up by Funkadelic,
Oh, yeah.
In Excess,
Mm-hmm.
Porcupine Tree. We have
Ooh.
we got some progressive coming up. Jamiroquai has officially
Ooh.
made the calendar with a celebration
Ra-
from Randy over here.
Randy
He's
has
waiting
been asking
6
that since like
years.
episode 2.
Why don't
Randy
you
was
do
like, "When are you gonna
Jamiroquai?"
do a Jamiroquai album?"
You know what? I'm waiting for episode number 158. Okay?
Perfect.
I don't feel like I can do it justice until we get to that point. So, but it is coming. But we will, other than that, we'll talk to everybody in 2 weeks. And have a good couple of weeks, everybody.
Yeah, take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.